Again, I find myself making a video concerning Mackenzie in a condition that cannot portray all of the facets of the case in my book. It's been subsumed into the larger issue of Gaza, but it emerged before the catastrophe in Gaza on TikTok as the Gaza war emerged in TikTok so vividly that I call it the TikTok war. Further, the same gang who poached Mackenzie has given me Parkinson's, making it very difficult for me to do all the typing that would be necessary to write the book. The gang in question are speculators in pirate editions of mysteries. They're serial killers. One of them, in fact, Cyril Wecht, has a book called Grave Secrets, which has been published, in which he takes on issues of arguable fantasy concerning people such as John Bennett Ramsey and John Fitzgerald Kennedy. He's the man who reported Kennedy's brain missing after he visited the Smithsonian. Interestingly enough, one of the members of the gang was caught stealing $6 million worth of books from the museum nearby Cyril Wecht's residence. So I know who these people are. I'll go into a little bit of history about them. It was about 1978 when I came home from the governor's school and was a senior at Taylor Alderdice High School, and I took the SATs. Although I scored over 1,000, I was very stunted from brain injuries and neurotoxic implants that I suffered at the hands of these Zionists working with Hollywood. But I scored about 1050 on the SAT, I believe. I was deaf, of course. But one of the questions I remember, they warned us there would be experimental questions. One of the questions was, after a delinquency story, did you feel sympathetic involvement or detached amusement? This was clearly an experimental question from the Attica psychiatry realm of state of Pennsylvania authority, one of whom mysteriously appeared at my father's bedside when he died, and another who the same man who as a child introduced me to Governor Milton's shop. So the idea of being sympathetically involved somehow being a laugh to those who see detached amusement, and was a sucker play to make it implied that I was sympathetic to the people who had kidnapped and brutally tortured me. They had me read The Outsiders. The experiment from on high makes it out to be that it's foolish to sympathize with anybody. That if you sympathize with anybody, you'll just end up at the wrong end of an Israeli rifle barrel. This is the mentality of the gang in question. And these are some of their fingerprints I'm discussing. So knowing who they are and where they operate from is an abstract principle in Pennsylvania's ideals of government. You're supposed to be detached amusement when people go wrong, rather than quarrel over such issues as sympathetic victimization, hostage taking, poaching of innocent people. I recall the girl who was surrounded by a gang, much like the gang that surrounded me. They lit her on fire and she died. They had been harassing her, bullying her for a long time. And you're supposed to be detached amusement when you read these stories. I don't see it that way. So the condition of being profiled by Cyril Wecht in the museum thief in question raises the issue of the fact that, for one thing, they're the suspicious people in the matter, and yet I was the one who was run out of town, tortured, and ended up with Parkinson's. You're supposed to be detached and amused. You're supposed to be detached and amused by the hybrid aspects of how they created a pirate edition storyline, poaching Mackenzie Shirella. John Shulman, who was arrested and given house arrest when anybody else would have gone to prison because he was Zionist. It was a $6 million museum heist. And of course, they tortured me and poisoned me. Showed me a book called Shaviti about LSD experimentation on Holocaust survivors. One named Kazetnik wrote the book. Kazetnik and Shirella coalesced because the evidence that they subjected me to a hallucinogen with a nerve agent, which induced an extreme situation like a Holocaust survivor experience, is clear from the anecdotes that were published regarding Mackenzie Shirella. The identical traits are in her testimony that are in ironclad proof of the way that I was poisoned by Zionists and tortured and subject to an extreme situation. Ironclad. And who should be covering for them but a Dr. Mackenzie in brain surgery? The author was an Attica State Prison psychiatrist in Pennsylvania and Ohio corrections. There are other indicators that Mackenzie was subject to what Pitt News advertised this gang's specialty in experimentation to be neurohypnosis. In other words, Mackenzie Shirella suffered a seizure from neurohypnotic, seizure-inducing, extreme situation, nerve agent-laced, illegal narcotics. And she was only a juvenile. She was a minor when this happened. Can you imagine being a child caught under the rubble in Gaza, unable to escape, but uninjured? This has been going on for months with these Zionist lunatics. Well, Mackenzie Shirella was subject to such an extreme situation, chemically induced. It reduced her to much younger than a child. The regressive hysteria of such a horrifying experience, which the perpetrators in my case admitted was a Holocaust simulation experience. They called a follow-up study an experience park. Their motives are to induce compliance whenever they experiment so that they have supreme authority to victimize innocent children and have people believe that they represent the best in the United States of America. That is the reason why I call Mackenzie Shirella a patriot. She went, I doubt not, to an Ohio public school or had friends from the Ohio public school system. just as I was from a Pittsburgh public school system. There are indications in the symbolism of how she was poached that unravel the way they think. It takes time to go into it. But one thing you should know that has been proven about what they did to me, these traffickers, is they actually used a Pittsburgh public school child for the inhuman trafficking operation of a Manson pornography snuff film clocked to pornographic genocide, the AIDS attack. And having done that, they jeered and mobilized the NAACP in Pittsburgh to claim it was charity fundraising for Darfur and the Congo in Africa. And they call themselves the Green Party. They not only mysteriously appeared on my father's deathbed, but they graffitied the rear side of his obituary from the editorial offices at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. So I've clipped some of the editorial issues that arose in the publications of the time Mackenzie's conviction was broadcast in Strongsville media, because sure enough, there's the same echoing itinerary of this professional, sophisticated, operating, licensed gang, licensed as attorneys, licensed as correction officers, licensed as brain researchers. And one of their specialties is neurohypnosis. I'm sure Mackenzie Shirella is an innocent party to what happened. I liken it to a car bomb.